One of the things you mentioned then was which I always think is really interesting, I think so relevant for veterans, is like employers looking at us and expecting certain experience for certain roles, which we're just not going to have.
For me, it was the first point is making your CV as relatable as possible to the role it is that you're going to go into. What is it in that role that at that time, the experiences that I gained that are going to enhance my profile in the job that I'm looking to get? That took me a long time to realise. There was a lot of CV rewriting because I just felt it wasn't working. Understand what it is you want to do, the role, look at what it is they're looking for and correlate what it is you bring to that role, not just trying to translate what you've done.
Welcome to Beyond Servers podcast. For our regular listeners, you'll be aware that this is a podcast about telling the stories of veterans who've made the move into civilian world. It's about understanding the challenges, the transition that they went through, and then gaining their experience and some hints and tips that they've picked up along the way. The person I'm speaking to today is an old colleague of mine, Tom Binns. So welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Tom served in the Yorkshire Regiment for 8 years and has subsequently left the Yorkshire Regiment and is now in the world of HR. There's more to that story, which we'll come on to. But great to have you here, Tom. There's lots I know that you're going to be able to tell us about your journey and the transition and how that all went and what you're doing today. But interestingly, I think for our viewers, Tom's actually settled in Germany, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a lot more detail. But really looking forward to this chat, mate.
Me too.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me once again.
Great. So we'll get straight into it, Tom.
Go for it.
Okay. So I suppose looking at who you are today, a bit about that, and then why you chose to join the military in the first place.
I am an HR business partner for a global management consultancy based here in the UK. They are a management consultancy that specialise in negotiation advisory services and capability building.
Right.
I joined the army in 2012, obviously went through Sandhurst like all of us do, and then commissioned into the 1st Battalion, the Yorkshire Regiment. I joined the battalion in Germany as we were closing down Germany, and then amalgamated into the 2nd Battalion when we moved to Cyprus.
Mm-hmm.
I spent 2 years in Cyprus, a pretty generic path for an infantry officer through platoon command, spent some time in a training establishment in Harrogate, came back to the battalion as the recce platoon commander, went on tour with the recce platoon, and then became the adjutant. And that's when I left the army and transitioned into civilian industry.
Nice.
When I transitioned out of the military, I took the decision to move to Germany, which is where my wife is from, and sort of not really, I know we'll get into it in a bit more detail, but not really knowing what I wanted to do. Tried to lean a little bit on my 2 years as adjutant, really enjoyed HR and the aspects of the job that were HR focused. And that steered me into project management. So I spent a bit of time implementing HR software for a food production company in Düsseldorf. And then I moved into a technology company and then the Gap Partnership, which is where I am today. Right. So it's been a bit of a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't worry, we're not going to ask you to speak any German. No, I know you're absolutely fluent already. So I think for a lot of viewers, they'll understand the role of an adjutant and how that translates into HR, and but I suppose it'd be good just to kind of flesh out a little bit and understand how that doing that role as your last role in the military kind of set you up to step into the world of HR.
Got you. So the golden thread of my career to date through the military into civilian life has always been people. People have been at the heart of everything that you do as an army officer, and it's been part of what I've done since I've left. And it's working with people. Bringing out the best in people is something that really gives me a lot of energy. Being a trusted sparring partner is something that I really enjoy, and ensuring that I create the value and impact within the workplace. The adjutant is best described as a strategic HR business partner in the civilian world. Like it covers the full span of the talent life cycle from not necessarily recruiting per se, but the onboarding and induction of new soldiers into the unit, training and training and capability development through to performance management, and then obviously the end of the life cycle where people leave the organization. With that comes an element of management of discipline. But I really enjoyed the broad depth of and the depth of the work that I was doing. And that ignited a bug in me, I think. So it became something I wanted to explore, but not necessarily something that I knew I should, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I left the military not necessarily knowing what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So like everyone else, most people I know.
I think I felt, that's always reassuring to know, because I think there's a lot of people out there who seem to have a very good structure and a very good plan in place. And all you ever hear throughout your transition is make sure you have a plan, make sure you know what you want to do, understand what you want to do, understand your skill set. I don't think I did. Maybe it's slightly self-deprecating, but I don't think I ever truly saw my military career coming to an end so early. And that wasn't, it was completely on my own doing. And for anybody, for listeners, it was personal choice to leave the military. There was no, medical discharge in there. It just felt right time, right place.
Yeah.
But with that, I didn't have a plan.
It's hard. And I think the conversations I've had with this, I'd say 90% of people in our shoes, and I know I felt the same. Even though you decide on your own terms, I want to leave, it's very rare that we have a crystallized view of what the next role or career or chapter, whatever you want to describe as, looks like.
Yeah.
I think particularly for us that were in the infantry, and I speak to that because that's my story as well, and I understand it, we're not necessarily, there's not necessarily a really well-fitting role in civilian. I've really said that in a terrible way, but there's not a role that kind of goes, infantry officer are going to be this, or, in civilian world, it's very different. But I like the fact that what you realized is that, the role of adjutant is different in so many ways than a normal HR business partner, but there is a lot of similarities there, and there's things you picked up, and there's a nucleus of something like, I enjoy this type of work, and it's maybe something I want to explore in the civilian world.
100%. I think the nail on the head there is, and I think your previous guests on here have highlighted a lot of the transition out of the military tends to steer you in a certain direction. And at times it feels quite, you're being stovepiped into something that they think you fit into. But because of everything that's going on around that time, and I guess there's an element of nervousness of leaving the environment of the military and into the unknown to some degree, I kind of found myself maybe following the flow a little bit. And it was only when I took a step back after finding my first role that I really started to connect the dots a little bit more between what I had been doing and where I wanted to go. Yeah. And that's not to take anything away from my first job out of the military. It was knowing and the realization that first job probably wasn't going to be my forever job.
Yeah.
But at the time when leaving, I was also looking for something that was going to be forever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's a really good point. And it's a difficult one because we've been in an organization where the career is mapped out ahead of you. And like, you might do slightly different jobs, but like you say, there's a fairly standard kind of like, this 2 years you're going to do this, then you're going to move on to this new role. And I think that's probably the biggest nervousness in a lot of ways is for veterans coming out is, what's my first role going to be?
Yeah.
And now when I speak to veterans, I kind of say like, put some effort into that and consider that. And you really need to, if there's something that you have a burning ambition to do, like if it's be a doctor or an accountant, I'm not sure if anyone wants to be an accountant, but like if there is something you think, I really want to do this, go and do it and invest the time and invest the training and then you can see a career in that. But for people like, and I'll put myself in this bracket, and it sounds like yourself, there's an element of just getting the right job in the right location. Because quite often it's like, I wanted to be in London to be with my now wife. And
exactly.
I was like similar in Germany. Yeah. And it's almost like get your foot in the door somewhere, get a job, and then you can kind of figure out, and don't worry too much about the first job not working out, because I think the stats show that the majority of service leavers don't last in their first year our first role, and that's not because they're not good or successful. It's because it maybe wasn't the right role. They've had that time now to settle in civilian life and figure out what's important to them.
100%. And it's, to bring context, as you said, it was personal reasons. It was coming off the back of, I think you join the military for a reason. And at the time that I was joining, it was all about the intensity of operations, albeit that they were starting to tail off a little bit, but you were sort of hoping that opportunity would come up. And it sounds, probably a bit gung-ho and slightly immature, but that's, part of the reason, motivation, a lot of people, that sense of adventure that you're looking for. And once you kind of tick that, for me, once I ticked the box to some extent through Optoral in 2017, it was then, okay, what's my next job? I know my next job is going to be adjutant, or ops maybe, but ops job was taken. And so what's going to put me in the best place to promote to major? What I didn't expect, and there's an element of naivety there, is that the operational cycle would come back around again so quickly. Yeah. And that was the sort of decision point for me. You alluded to personal reasons. Your now wife, exactly the same circumstances. Met my wife just before the army. She followed me. We weren't married at the time, but maintained a long distance relationship for the whole time that I was serving, and then got married and went straight on tour. And I think that was a sort of a reality check of, do I want to be away for 5 months? Do I want to be close to home? Do I want to not be commuting between the UK and Germany every weekend? Yeah. And so it was a decision point between operational tours, really. Yeah,
it makes sense. And I think you as well, you've got to, when you're making that transition, you've got to look at the whole picture of, like, it's not just about getting a job with the right title, getting paid the same amount of money. It's like, actually, because I think people make decisions on that sometimes, and it ends up being the wrong decision because they end up having to travel still. Yeah, they're not based at where they want to be based, or the role actually isn't particularly interesting or doesn't fit their skill set. So it's for me, I think you really just got to think about and almost do a list of, like, what are the key things, what's most important, why are you actually leaving? Like, if it is to spend more time with your family and your friends, then maybe don't take a job that's based overseas, or that's going to require a lot of travel. And it's just it's a whole view of the opportunities that are out there. And I think people panic to get into that first job, and like, there's not many jobs where you get a year to leave. So it's like, take that opportunity and actually spend the time to figure out, like, what are my non-negotiables in this journey. And if you get those, it'll almost help you reject things, which is often as important as accepting something.
100%. I think the one thing that you take for granted is that year, though.
Yeah.
And I think your natural tendency in that environment, certainly, again, was to not step away from it and give resettlement and the transition period the time that it probably needed, especially if I was geographically relocating. Yeah. And so, I stayed probably focused on work too long, not looking outside. Yeah. But knowing that eventually I was going to walk out the front gate and be left to go and find something. Yeah. So you've got to strike the balance. And as you say, pros and cons list was quite a simple and good way to do it, really. Yeah. But for me, it was balance. Find the balance between work and life.
100%. And you're right. And I think there is that element during that year period where you don't want to drop your standards or not give your everything to that last job that you're in, whether it's adjutant or whatever job you're doing. But there is a balance there. You've got to also remember that, as soon as you leave the camp gates and you've handed back your kit, like, they'll move on. They've got some conveyor belt of officers or NCOs coming through, and it's like, it's getting that balance right. And I think that can be, I know I found that period challenging, to make sure that I was setting myself up and focusing on what I needed to do, but also, trying to leave in the best way possible, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love to get into just, like, so we talked about, your reasons for leaving. It sounds like, similar to mine in a lot of ways, but I'll be honest, when you called, I remember you called me when you were leaving for some advice. I was quite shocked because I saw you as like full career, like always going to be in the army. Obviously, you've got a really strong family pedigree in the military, and particularly in our regiment. And I just presumed you were going to be, take over the battalion at some point, and that was the journey for you. But what was actually going through your head? You had your reasons. But then you'd actually, I presume it was 7 clips to freedom on JPA, like it used to be. You made that decision. You'd done. What's going through your head at that point? How are you feeling about things?
Oddly, there was a lot of procrastination leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I was going to do it. I had a lot of conversations with my parents around it, and then my wife, and was a strong believer that it was the right thing. But I also, the unit was stepping back onto an operational cycle, and I kind of felt like I was stepping off that.
Yeah.
And so I prolonged having the conversation with the commanding officer at the time, because I was slightly nervous of the reaction that it would get, not only from him, but I guess within the wider battalion headquarters at the point in time that people started to know. And I guess, you probably shouldn't necessarily always care about what other people think. And actually the transition out of the military has taught me one thing, and that is to look after yourself and focus on number one.
Yeah.
But at the time it was slightly, I guess, nerve-wracking. But the understanding that came from when I did have the communication was far beyond that I was ever expecting. A complete acknowledgement and acceptance of it was the right thing for me personally, and that there was going to be that the support was there from the people who I was working closely with at the time to then help me through that through leaving.
Yeah.
And I think that helped a lot. It then became about me giving myself, as I said a minute ago, giving myself that space to step away from the job and focus on getting out of the army.
Yeah.
But I didn't. There was a sense of relief once you do the 7 clicks. Because it's done. It's just the procedural aspect, but it's the fact that you've taken the decision, you've done it, and you now know that, okay, that's now my trajectory, that's my path, that's what I need to now focus on.
Yeah.
Living true to that. As you said, we had that phone call shortly after I did it, as I started to seek advice. And the one thing I do remember you saying to me is plan and have a plan, and be clear in your mind what it is that you might want to do and where your skill set lies. No disrespect. That I probably didn't follow that as closely as I should.
Yeah.
But hey,
it's hard.
You live and learn.
You do, and it's mate, it's like anyone that's going through it now. There's a raft of emotions. I think it's a very emotional decision because having now been in the civilian world probably longer than I actually served in the regular army. And I've worked in a few different companies. There's nothing I've yet to experience an environment like being in the army, where it is all encompassing. Like my job now, you think about work and sometimes you think, oh God, I've not done this or that. But, the army, you lived in with everyone you work with, you lived on camp and you were completely immersed in that environment. You socialized together and, you'd sit and have lunch together and you're away for periods of time. And it's a calling in some ways. But it's a completely immersive environment. So being like stepping away from that and choosing to pursue another career isn't like just leaving a company in the civilian world. I don't think it's a lot more emotive decision than that.
I think you've invested a lot.
Yeah.
To get to that stage. I just, if I was to go back to being 17 again and doing the Army Officer Selection briefing week and knowing what a car crash that was for me.
At 17, it's too early to do it.
Too early to do it. So that's lesson number one. And then going back on it, knowing that it was what I wanted to do post-university, you've invested not only a huge amount of time in what is essentially a recruitment process that sounds, and then you've got a full year of training, if not 18 months, before you're actually qualified to go and do what you do. And yeah, it's a huge amount of investment, but 100% worth it. And like you say, it's different to anything, to any other job in this. If you were to look back to Cyprus, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the same people around the same table,
which is good and bad.
Yeah, that's good. But you will always look for, and oddly, there's so many people who would, would give a lot to be living in Cyprus on a Mediterranean island and sunshine and things, but you kind of take it for granted, because there are times when you're on the island and all you're thinking about is getting home. But I look back on it with some pretty cool memories.
Yeah, same.
And zero regret.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the thing. I think it's, if you can walk away in that position, then it does make the next phase of your life a lot easier. I think something you mentioned then as well about kind of looking after yourself and making sure you focus on number one. I think that's really true. And the fact that the conversations that you had with your commanding officer, et cetera, at the time, I think that's really a really important step for people leaving, that the army, the military, RAF, whoever it is, the people who are having those conversations, they get that right, because I think sometimes they don't. And I know my experience, it was not a particularly nice conversation with the kind of training unit I was at the time. And it was almost felt like I was kind of abandoning them type thing. And I think that's the wrong way to go about that, because you want people leaving the military, they should be advocates for that. And like,
they're a recruiter in a weird way.
Exactly.
They're the ones who are going to refer.
In your job now, like, big part of HR is offboarding as well as onboarding.
Yeah.
It's like getting that bit right so that people have a good experience about your company. And I think at times that's just something that it shouldn't be a case of, oh, well, that person's signed off now out of the army, we don't need to worry about them anymore, they'll do their own thing. I think there needs to be a bit more around that, how we actually offboard people well, if that makes sense.
100%. And I think it was the people around me that at that point, or in the unit at that point, one, they were very focused, they knew what they were doing for the next 18 months, and so they needed to deliver it. And so you were kind of as much as part of that, as much as you could be through your transition. So that keeping yourself busy was the balance is another good word again. But for me, keeping myself busy to a certain extent within what was going on felt like he was still bringing some value, as opposed to, like you say, it can feel like in cases they take scope away from you and you're just sort of left to twiddle your thumbs a little bit. But I never felt that, actually.
Good.
That's quite
So you've left the military.
Yeah.
You're into your first role, and you mentioned that it wasn't necessarily potentially the exact right role, and but it helped you shape what you're looking to do. Any sort of lessons from that kind of early part of your civilian career, or things that you think, I suppose big mistakes or big successes that you think would be useful for the audience?
It's a cliche, but your network is going to be your biggest asset. And everybody says it, but again, it's about the whole idea around planning. You take it for granted. When people said build your network, you kind of took it for granted. But somebody said to me, and I can't remember who it was, it might even be my dad, said to me, contact at least one person a day on LinkedIn. Find somebody in a company that you have an interest in, and reach out to them. Mm-hmm. Because if they connect with you and they respond, chances are they might put you in touch with one other person, and then your network builds. And I think that was critical for me, because I was moving to Europe, to a country where I didn't speak the language, albeit my wife being from Germany. But that the only way I was ever going to get into a job was through my network, I think. And I'm a bit of a strong believer in that was why I did in the first place. And because my first role in Germany came about through somebody on LinkedIn, I saw that they worked in this company based in Dusseldorf that they had also served, and then it was a message on LinkedIn, and they put me in touch with the recruiter, and they got me the interview, and then I was successful at interview. But up until that point, it had been a pretty exhausting recruitment process. There was a lot of what felt at the time door closing on experience and valuing qualifications. But having that persistence, and the one thing the military teaches you is that persistence, is to have that persistence, that resilience when you kind of get that no to look for another way, and you just got to keep going. So the biggest piece of advice I'd have for anyone is network. Yeah. And I'm really grateful. My first job, they took a bit of a chance on me, I guess. Yes, as a project manager, and I had a really, really good 2 years there, a really, really enjoyable 2 years. But it was the right time to move on.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think network is, it's funny because I think in the civilian world, there's just more of that emphasis on the network, because people understand that you need to connect with people, you need to be on LinkedIn, you need to be visible, you need to kind of get yourself out there. And I think the problem with people in the military, not problem, but just the circumstances are, you don't need to network to get your next job. It's like, it's just going to happen for you. You just need to, make sure that you do a good job in your current role, but it's pretty much just going to fall into line. There's certain things you need to be selected for and bits and pieces, but it's done through performance. And there's always network. There's a network in your unit. You're making sure you're speaking and engaging with people, but it's just not the same. It's a bit more set out than in civilian world.
Yeah, I kind of has to look back at what my LinkedIn network looked like at that point in time. It probably wasn't exactly external to the military, and so it became about broadening out my branches a little bit, looking at what's available, who's there. And not being shy of trying to pick up the phone and have a conversation with people. And I think your previous guest, Pete, alluded to it. He said that it's surprising, I think it was him, it's surprising how many people are willing to have a conversation and are willing to help. And I think, it's invaluable.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's, you get opportunities through places you never thought that you would. And it's just about, I think certainly in the early stages, it is genuinely just engage. And like you say, one person a day, speaking, connecting, and you might pick up even just snippets of good advice here or there. And it might not necessarily lead to a job. It's not about, I don't want to speak to that person because they work at this company. I don't want to work there. It's about, they might know someone who they'd introduce you to. So,
yeah,
I think you're right. It's just, honestly, just speak, engage, have conversations, particularly if you don't really know what you want to do. Because I know I spoke to another ex-colleague of ours on a previous podcast, and going through that, he was amazing at the networking piece in terms of LinkedIn, and, kind of almost did like a weekly blog of what he was going through and the challenges and the successes. But he, through that journey, shaped what he actually wanted to do in his next role.
Yeah.
And he started off not having any clue.
Yeah.
And then ended up going, well, listen, I know now what I want to do. And that was just through speaking to people. So it's so important.
Massively. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned then was which I always think is really interesting, I think so relevant for veterans, is like employers looking at us and expecting certain experience for certain roles, which we're just not going to have. And it's almost, how would you articulate the value of what you bring? And I'm a big one for, like, you've got to look at your values, your characteristics that you bring to the table, your soft skills, and almost kind of try and shape your interviewing and your searching around those sorts of things. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts around how you found that kind of interviewing, and when if potentially people say, well, you've not got this experience, was there anything that you any kind of strategies you had around that?
It's a really good question, because I'm trying to now think back to the interviews, and they've not been, I guess, there's not been a massive amount of them. There's been a lot of applications, but often not a lot of interviews to come out of them. I think for me, it was the first point is making again, it sounds slightly daft, but it's making your CV as relatable as possible to the role it is that you're going to go into. Not always trying to immediately translate your platoon command into operations manager or whatever it is, but making it specific to what is it in that role that I, at that time, the experiences that I gained that are going to enhance my profile in the job that I'm looking to get. Yeah. If that makes sense. I'm probably waffling, but that took me a long time to realize. There was a lot of CV rewriting because I just felt it wasn't working. And when I did start to realize that it was about sometimes quantifying, but looking at what I've achieved in that role that is relatable to what it is they're looking for, correlating that, and then putting it onto paper, that it started to work a bit more, even just through filters. And then in interview, it's how you then bring that across and translate that in as clear and as concise a way, right? Whilst not losing your personality in doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was really lucky. I've been really lucky in the 3 recruitment processes that have led to my subsequent roles since leaving. The first one was just a very long but very friendly, amicable conversation where the panel just wanted to know about me. There was no question around, okay, could he do the job? It was, am I the right fit?
Yeah.
And then the subsequent ones after that, I had enough practice by that point. Don't take for granted rehearsing, but not rehearsing to the point where it's scripted.
Yeah.
It's being really clear in your head the structure in which you were to answer in any sort of recruiting process, and how you provide the answers and the examples by which you're going to put on the table. Are they relatable? Are they specific to the role? Do they correlate to the role again?
Yeah.
Because I think at times it's easy to get lost in a well, I did X, Y, Z, but it's just exciting to tell. It's got absolutely no correlation to the role.
I'm spinning its face.
Yeah. Which it might, at the time it probably doesn't feel like that, but I think in hindsight, sometimes it must have come across like that.
Yeah.
So that, it's really understand what it is you want to do, the role, look at what it is they're looking for and correlate what it is you bring to that role.
Yeah.
Not just trying to translate what you've done.
Exactly. That's really good advice, I think, because I think that's where there is challenges. Part of me as well, as I look at it, is if a business aren't even willing to entertain a conversation as well, then it's probably not necessarily the right place you want to be, because I think for veterans, and again, there's so many different types of veterans. I'm conscious if you're in the Royal Signals or, logistics, you might have some really specific qualifications that absolutely map across the civilian work, and that's a fairly easy fix. But for a lot of us, that isn't the case. I think you want to work in an organization that, one, respects what you've done. It's not like there's not like this hero worship type thing. That's not what I mean. It's like, but understands, not necessarily fully understands, but has a respect for what you've done and the skills you bring to the table, but also has an understanding that there's going to be gaps in what you've done compared to potentially somebody at a similar level that they'd be hiring from a competitor or something like that. So you want an organization that's supportive, and if they're not willing to even entertain the conversation, then I wouldn't really be pushing that. Because you are going to need support, you are going to need development, and there's going to be definite areas of gaps that you need to help fill. And if the company isn't there to develop you and coach you through that, then it's probably not the right place to be.
True. One perspective I'd give to it is, and I think you said it, is expectation. Never expect them to understand, but know that they might want to understand. Yeah. And if the environment is wanting to understand your experience and what you bring, then absolutely it's the right place. But the wrong mindset would be to go into it with the expectation that they do. Yeah. Because I think you kind of, like you say, you don't want to put yourself on maybe sometimes a negative foot, or coming across as, I think you're able to then translate your value a lot better, and subsequently set yourself up for success long term. If that makes a little bit of sense. It does.
And I think you've got to go in with the right mindset.
Right mindset. Be completely open, minded about what the role's going to give you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, like we said at the beginning, it's not necessarily going to be the role forever, but making, it's within the confines of what the experience you have, where you are right now, and what it is you want to achieve, and trying to develop on or build that picture of what you want to achieve. It's only, it's one step forwards.
Yeah, 100%.
And at the time, it doesn't always feel like that. That's a really, it can feel quite, you're stagnating.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, but I think it's also as well like understanding that, you're going to come into a very different culture, and potentially what we value in the military, like, turning up to a meeting 5 minutes minimum before it starts, everyone's shaved, everyone's got the boots polished, and it's not even like you're on your phone. Phones aren't even in the equation at this point. Like when I first went into the civilian world, it was a very different experience with walking into meetings and people would on their phones and turning up late, and looked almost disheveled in some ways, and you're kind of like, wow, this is different. But then you kind of have to go, actually, well, what do these people bring to the party? And I learned so much of some of the people in my first few roles, particularly, who, they weren't necessarily maybe as polished in that sense as we were with some of the stuff, and have some of the kind of strict rules that we lived by. But they could do things with spreadsheets that I didn't even know were a thing. And it's being able to learn off the people that you end up working with, and not trying to hold them to a military standard on bearing or whatever that is. It's like, actually, let's focus on what these people are, because some of these people are absolute experts in their field and can really help me develop my skills and experience.
It's 100%. It's leveraging. It's exactly as you did in the military. It's leveraging the experience and knowledge of those around you.
Yeah.
Just because you're the platoon commander doesn't mean that you were the be all and end all and the knowledge of the source of their knowledge, right? It was leveraging the experience.
So you're not
far from it. Exactly. It's leveraging the experience of your senior, junior NCOs and also your private soldiers, and putting them in a position where they feel I guess, empowered, right? And that, it's the same. If you go into a civilian, if you go into a job outside the military with that sort of mindset and wanting that thirst for knowledge and understanding from the people around you, one, you'll always learn. And two, I'm a bit of a strong believer that that's what will give you the energy to find what it is that you want to do longer term.
Yeah.
And now I have I guess power of hindsight a little bit, but I think I'm finding that energy in what I do now, and that value, that feeling that I'm creating more value, I'm having more of an impact, and that's giving a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in some respect. It's momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So obviously one of the bits of this podcast, Tom, is around, I suppose I'm trying to highlight where people haven't necessarily, did what I did initially, where you go into the big four and, you go and work with one of the big banks, whatever, and or Amazon, and there's all these different big programs of work for these types of organizations, which really actively look to hire veterans, which I think is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying anything against that, but I think there's other avenues like smaller or medium-sized businesses and different types of roles that people don't really think about. But I feel like you've had a bit of a journey in that sense, and you've gone to a few different companies, and you've gone into the HR space, which is probably not as much of a proven route as you would expect from an army officer, because, like you said, our job was all about people. I think it's more veterans should go into HR, but I'd be interested, how would you feel, what do you think are the advantages for veterans of maybe moving into smaller, medium-sized businesses rather than these big corporate businesses on a military program, which is, hiring thousands of veterans or whatever?
I think one of the things that struck, so if I go back to the first job, in my 3 roles, I've progressively moved into smaller organizations. So the first one was 13,000, second one was about 600 and something, and the one I'm in now is just under 300. So they've got progressively smaller, and that sort of size, I didn't realize it, or I've only realized it recently, but it's quite similar to being in a unit environment in a weird way. And with that comes some real strengths, in the sense that you might not know everybody personally, but you certainly know names, and you can put a face to those names. And that creates a unique environment again. One of the things that I always was concerned about, and was, can I add value? Can I have an impact? And am I always going to learn? Am I going to be on a continuous journey of learning? And the minute I feel like I might be stagnating, my mind, what's next?
Yeah.
And I've found that being in a small to medium-sized business now, feel like I'm bringing value. I've not always. I'll let them question that. But I feel like the work that I'm doing, it's on a personal nature, and it's having an impact. And you get to know all functions of the business. Yeah. Whereas in a larger organization, certainly in my first role, I was on a program, and I was working on that program, and I had very little to do with the other functions within the business. I had the project team that I was working with and managing, and that was pretty much it. I knew who people were within the office, but I didn't necessarily do anything, collaborate with them. That changes massively. And so that cross-functional understanding and starting to develop more of a commercial acumen in that environment, for me, it's it's 10 times more powerful for me because it's more concentrated. The people you are collaborating with are closer to you. And you learn a lot more about how a business functions. I think you're given a little bit more freedom in terms of, if you've got a bit more of an entrepreneurial mindset. I don't necessarily, but I do think I'm quite hunter mentality. I go looking. Then for me also, it's the right place to be because it is, it's complete one thing. What's next? Keeping yourself busy, and as long as that busyness is value creating and having the impact, and you're learning, it's
that's a really good answer. I think the impact thing is something that kind of keeps coming up on this podcast quite a lot, and that's how I feel about it as well, having done a similar journey, gone into smaller and smaller businesses. And I think there is that element of just being, we're kind of, one of the things we're great at the army is almost that element of just get stuff done. And it's like, no 2 days are the same. And, you could, there's a career planned out for you in a lot of ways, but you might suddenly be like, right, you're going to go and do this role, or right, you're getting taken out now and you're going to go and do this for 6 months. And so we're quite adept at turning our hand to different tasks and different projects and things that we need to achieve. So I think that's a real benefit. And like you mentioned as well, the benefit on the other side is, yes, it's commerciality. That's probably what you lack most as a veteran, is like you don't have that commerciality bit. Like people talk about being responsible for millions of pounds worth of equipment, and you're not really. It's not owned by you; it's owned by the army, and like there is a level of responsibility there. But it's seeing a smaller business, how it runs, how the finance department links into HR, and what a profit and loss looks like, and all that sort of stuff is so important, and it's probably the biggest gap. And you won't get that in a big corporate.
No, absolutely not. I think swim lanes can become quite pronounced. Certainly for me, I found that your swim lane was very clear in a bigger organisation. Processes and structures, the tools by which they do stuff are very clear. That is also the same in a small to medium sized, but certainly within the team I work with now, is when stuff just needs to get done. The swim lanes, it's all hands to the pump. It's just and
it's big swimming pool.
Yeah, and that's an environment that favours me, and I think, it's for me, it's the right place.
Great. Right, we're coming to the end of this, Tom. This has been some great, really insightful stuff, and it's been brilliant. But I suppose what I always like to finish is any kind of, and we've teased out lots of stuff out of this, but just kind of headlines. If someone like came to you now and said, like, what's your top bits of advice for me? I'm looking at leaving the army or the navy or whatever. What would you say to that person as like, these are the things you should do or things you should think about? What's your key advice?
That's a really good question. And without, I guess, beating the drum of, I can beat the drum of those who've gone before. I think it is, having a plan is great, but having clarity over what it is you value, what it is you bring, is even more important, because only then can you really truly understand what it is you want to do and what you're looking for. That's going to bring that continued fulfillment. And you don't, like you say, there is a lot of pressure and a lot of noise of you've got to have the plan, to step into that first job. I didn't have a job for 3 months after I left, and I just focused on doing a bit of language, a bit of job hunting, and trying to really understand what it is I wanted to do before I stepped into something, committed to something that I knew I wouldn't want to give everything or all my energy to. So understand, what are your priorities? What do you look for? What is it you value in your skill set? Really sit down, scrutinize those, and only then would I start to hone in more detail.
Nice. And try and enjoy the journey as well.
Yeah, I think, but also, and appreciate it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing, is you are your biggest critic in all of this. And the only person who puts pressure on you in all of that journey is really yourself. And it's manifested and reinforced, I guess, by some of what you read and see as well. And if you can silence or drown some of that out and, just relax and enjoy it, it becomes, you get better clarity, I think.
Yeah. Easier said than done, though.
It is 100%.
It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
So what's final one then, Tom? What's next for you, mate? What's the journey look like from here?
Who knows? Take it as it comes. I'm enjoying what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying who I'm working for, the team, and so we'll just sort of ride that wave a little bit longer.
Good.
To see where it takes me.
Good. Well, and listen, I think that's a big part of it as well. Like, you know, you can have all these plans, but I think there's got to be an element of, like, you know, like we said at the start of this, like all the things that are non-negotiables, like now that you're when you leave the military, you are a master of your own destiny, you know, whereas people aren't necessarily telling where you need to live or where your next job's going to be. And I just think, like, take the enjoyment out of that and really lean into it and actually drive forward your own career and your own future, but shape it around those non-negotiables. They may change, they may shift, but just make sure you try and stick to that and actually get the benefits of leaving the military, but as well as having a respect for what you've done and the service that you had.
Absolutely. The friendship group will always be there as well. Right?
Exactly. Great, Tom. Listen, really appreciate that.
Thank you
so much. I know that's been so useful for our audience, and great to see you doing so well. And thanks for joining the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Aaron. Cheers.